Welcome to Backyard Catch Podcast. This is your host, Nick Roby, for the pilot episode, episode 1, numero uno. I'm so excited to get started, guys. First off, thank you so much for jumping in and listening. I know I've talked to several people, and it's just been fun to have this idea and then get started and have so much support. So thank you so much for all of those already for you who have been so supportive of me. And so we're going to jump right in. And so we've got a bunch of fun things planned. We have our head website, backyardcatch.com. And we've already jumped in. I mean, we've had a couple articles. We've had a welcome article, Let's Play Ball. It's a great way to start a baseball game, Let's Play Ball. And just jumping in saying kind of what we're about, what we're getting into. This thing is moving and growing as we go, but I wanted to also share some of the heart behind it too. And then also we're going to jump into, we had released our 8-team playoff article and what that would have looked like. There's been so much talk of back and forth if it should be 4-team or it should be 8-team. And really that was just a fun way to get started and see what would have an 8-team playoff looked like this year. And so, but first, just to give you a little background of me, my name's Nick. I am currently living in Greenville, South Carolina. Just recently got married to my beautiful wife. So much fun, so much exciting things going on. I've gotten started in sports from a very early age. I was playing catch in the backyard as far as I can remember. We were shooting hoops. We were watching games. It was so much fun. I mean, I can't remember a time in my life where we weren't playing sports. My brother and I, Tim, would go back and forth all the time. We played a lot of one-on-one games, one-on-one basketball. The big one was football, too. We would play one-on-one tackle football and just line up head-to-head, grudge match, facing each other, wearing the face masks and everything. And we would play tackle football, and we would just try to score on each other. I'm bigger than him, and so I would try to just ram him over. And he was quicker than me, so he would try to jump around me, and we would have the best time. I mean, it usually ended in some kind of disagreement, but I mean, that's what brothers do. We used to always say we're out of balance when we're trying to go out of bounds. But he and I were just close with that, and it was so much fun. I remember playing basketball in the backyard and making up games for myself, making up tournament brackets, shooting free throws, getting the last second shot, and it's swishing in. I mean, we played horse, all those things. And you just grow up. I mean, I would just practice playing wiffle ball, have these different teams, play all these different games where you would like certain thing. If you hit off the wall, it was a double. If you hit it past the neighbor's bushes, that was a home run. I know they didn't really love that. But, some kind of marker like that. We just did that our whole life. And I grew up loving the Baltimore Orioles. That was my favorite team. So I grew up in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, and they were the closest team. That was before the Nationals came to town in D.C. when they moved from Montreal. And so the Baltimore Orioles were the closest team. I remember going with my whole family, driving up to Baltimore, seeing the harbor, being on the waterfront, seeing the Battle of 1812, that whole area, and then going to Camden Yards. And it was such a magical, wonderful thing. Sitting in the outfield bleachers on a beautiful day and seeing guys like Cal Ripken Jr., Brady Anderson, B.J. Surhoff, all these guys just I thought it was such an amazing thing that they're getting to do something that I love, and that was their job. And I loved Cal Ripken Jr. I mean, a guy who started over 2,000 straight games in a baseball season, never asking out. I think he was just my hero growing up. And even though we played totally different positions, I mean, I'm a tall guy, left-handed, so I played first base and pitcher, but Cal was just a shortstop, but I just love the way he played. We had so much fun going back and forth. So the Orioles have been my favorite team for like forever in baseball. Now they haven't been very good. They probably made the playoffs like 4 times in my lifetime. But I think what's so fun about that is that they're just your team, and not everybody else liked them, but it was just fun to watch them. I also remember going to Clemson Tigers games, Clemson Tigers football games, and because my grandmother lived down there, and that was such a fun thing. I mean, the atmosphere of college football, there's just nothing like it. The Tigers running down the hill, watching C.J. Spiller take the opening kickoff back for a touchdown, watching guys like Woody Dantzler winning a game in overtime, him running around. I mean, just all that's just so much fun. And I know all my teams ended up being orange. I didn't plan that, but it ended up working out that way. Playing rec league ball with my dad being the coach, and just getting to watch all these games and get to play and play with your friends. And I think that's just what's so fun about sports, is that there's such a deep connection we have with people, and we're so close to everyone. When you go through something like that together, even as kids, and all these different teams, I mean, getting to wear like these major league jerseys, I loved it so much. Even like watching the Olympics, I thought that was so cool. Getting to represent your country, and I remember swimming was so so much fun to watch, just because the way they would show the bar meter of the or track, they would do this too. They would have the meter, the line of where the world record was, and you could watch these guys just running back and forth trying to catch this world record. I thought that was the coolest little graphic, and that's a little nerdy, but I loved it. And so, I mean, there's so much in here. My dad and I would play Stratomatic Baseball, which is this card game where you get to take all the major league players, their years, and take their numbers, and get to make your own team and get to use them, and strategize and kind of pretend you were the manager. And you got to see from that perspective. And from seeing that, you get to see this whole vast different way of thinking about the game. I mean, I was doing that or playing stuff online from, when I was 9, 10 years old, and just thinking about it and loving it and just watching it so much. I mean, I remember, in 2001 when the Diamondbacks won in Game 7 of the World Series, beating the big bad Yankees, who had just won, 4 out of 5 championships, and they defeated the closer, Mariano Rivera, who is such a cool guy. But at the time, he was just such a dominant closer. No one could beat him. No one can take him down. And it was just, I just remember there's just moments like that, and I just thought that was so cool. We also had games like Backyard Sports, where you get to draft players that they made, like a Pablo Sanchez or a Pete Wheeler or Keisha Phillips or Dmitry Petronov. I mean, these names are like ingrained in my brain just from playing, and then they would intertwine the major league players, and it was so cool because you get to play baseball, basketball, soccer, football, and get to combine these teams and get to make this whole thing. And it was so cool. And Tim and I used to love playing that together. So really, that's kind of where this idea is coming up from Backyard Catch, is that we are in a time right now where people love sports so much, and we're trying to analyze so much of what's going on. I mean, I love staying in tune on ESPN of who's being traded, who's going this way, or what's happening. Are the Warriors okay? All these different things, NFL playoffs, who's doing well, who's doing not. I mean, Clemson and Alabama just played an awesome game for the national championship, and seeing all the reactions of that. But I think what's starting to happen more and more, especially with being such a social media era, with Twitter and Instagram kind of dominating how we view and ingest or take in information, it's becoming more and more of a reactionary of beating to who's the first or who has the hottest take. And I think sometimes we're kind of drifting away from the heart of why we love these games in the first place. And I think we're drifting more towards trying to be the first or the best at grabbing the information the quickest, or having the hottest take to get the most viewers. And I know that that's what these networks are trying to do to get viewership and to keep subscriptions going. I mean, it's kind of documented that ESPN's kind of been losing some subscriptions because it's hard for people to pay all for those different things. And so they're trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. And then you have ones like that, or Fox, or all these other, things like FS1, which is a brand of Fox, or you have other ones that are these smaller websites and networks, which are cool because they analyze sports in kind of a different way, or have these like interview conversations or these podcasts, which are interesting. But sometimes they're done in a way to where, I don't know, there's just no filter. There's no boundary with it. It's a lot of making fun of people, or it's a lot of just trying to have these quick remarks, which I know that there's a market for that. But I think there's this medium area to where we can talk about sports like you're talking about it, like you'd be talking about it with your son, or be talking about it with your dad, and you're just talking about it. You're not trying to like make it or take it and make it into something that it's not. You're just enjoying what it is, and just for the love of the game. And I think that's what's so cool about it. And also, I just remember something I loved so much growing up was playing catch. And what the beauty about playing catch is, like throwing a baseball back and forth, throwing a football, or just being in the yard, is you're outside together. And you could be having these deep conversations, you could be having these light conversations. It can be all in between. And the fun part about that is that there's not a constriction of what it has to be, or this hot take or not. I mean, it can be, but I think there's a beauty of it. You don't even have to talk that much. You're just being together and just enjoying that aspect of it. So really what I would love is for this, and especially with this podcast, is this to be like we're playing catch, to be like we're throwing the ball back and forth. You know, it's you and me, and we're just talking, we're just hanging out. We're getting to know each other. Some of you I may have known for a while, and some of you I've not gotten the chance to get to know yet. And so we're just going to kind of take this as it goes. We're going to have some episodes that are going to be kind of lighter, you know, like what's your favorite nicknames in sports, or your best, the 5 favorite sports moments of your life that you loved. Or it could be deeper, or like, are athletes making too much money to play a game when we have all these other stuff going on? Or it's like, are we setting up people the best when you have these like from nothing to millions of dollars? Is that really setting up people? Are they really getting the financial advice that they need? And I think there's a bunch of different conversations in there that could be fun just to dive into. And so some weeks it'll be like this, where it's just me, you and me, just hanging out, whether it's in your car or you're at home or listening with some friends. Or it could be us, me interviewing with another friend, another person who I think could be fun to bring in for a certain conversation. And it's the 3 of us hanging out, or how many people we end up going, and just kind of seeing where it goes. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. And I think this can be a really cool thing, and I would really enjoy to jump into this with you. All right, so we're going to jump in to the first breakdown article that the website went into, and that was taking through the 8-team playoff. And so this year there's been a lot of this back and forth debate, you know, and people will be like, well, obviously it should only be the 4 best teams in the country, that there's not these 8 great teams. And then once you start getting to that number, it should be that. And then you have other people, well, they'll be like, well, obviously you should have 8 teams because you have 5 divisions, 5 conferences, and then you are automatically going to leave one of them out. And then you have one of these at-large bids. And then what about UCF? Like, what do you do with them? And so you just hear this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so, you know, when you have teams like Clemson or Alabama, who've been getting in practically every year, I think except for 1 year when Clemson didn't get in, and Alabama's been in every year. I mean, of course, they're going to be okay with the playoff just the way it is, because why would they want to play another game? You know, like football's hard enough as it is, and there's injuries, and there's fatigue, and there's all these different things. And so why would they want to play another game? And so, but then you have these other teams like Georgia, who just lost so close and they're hoping to get in, or UCF, who's been dying to get into this playoff and wanting to play with the big boys. I mean, there's always a team looking out on the outskirts in, or you have the Pac-12, who is fighting and barely gets a shot, or an Ohio State, who has a good year, but it wasn't quite enough to reach that level. And so you have a conference that's getting left out. And then you have, like 2 years ago, where you have Georgia and Alabama, 2 from the same conference, make it in. And so there's just a lot of this talk back and forth. And I think there's a lot of obvious, like, oh, it should be obviously this or obviously this. And I think sometimes that takes away the joy of what actually this is. And I think that we have a good playoff system right now, but also 8 teams could be really good too. And it could be good to include those other teams and make them play. And I think it's very dependent on the year. And that's why this gets tricky, is because we get so reactionary to what happened. When you have a little bit more diversity in the teams and they're more on an equal playing field, a bigger playoff makes more sense. But then when you have two dominant teams like this year, Alabama and Clemson, when they're clearly in this first tier of everybody else, it's like, well, do you really want to include, a 3-loss conference champion in there just because they won their game to be in the playoff? We obviously know who the teams are. And obvious is like this interesting question, because obvious is word, and it's just from what our perspective is. And so anyway, the fun part about this article is just really wanting to dive into what would it have looked like, because right now we do have a 14 playoff where the two semifinals are rotated between the traditional New Year's Six bowls, and then they have a championship site. And so it'd be like, what would it have looked like with an 8-team playoff? And so that's what we're going to dive into. And so to set this up, really, you would have had to, if you're going to do 8 teams, because there's so much logistics and the power that's at play, and to get everyone to participate, and you really want this to be the best thing across the country, you would have to include the conference champion of the 5 conferences. The ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. And I know with some of these other conferences where they say their number, it's funny when they're different. Actual numbers, how many teams are in their conference. But so you have to take those 5. And I think it really doesn't matter how will have determined it. Now, most of them will have probably determined it by still doing a conference championship game, because, there's a lot of money in that, and it gives the opportunity for teams to get in. But I think you let them in. And with an 8-team, one of the caveats is that you have a team like a Northwestern or even like a Pittsburgh, who I think they were 7-5 going into the championship game, because they were the best, because the Coastal was way below the Atlantic this year in ACC. And so that's a big caveat. It's like, what are you going to do? Just let them in. And I think you have to kind of make it equal across the board. You can't just kind of pick and choose the opinions of like, well, this team's really good or this team's not. You have to give some kind of level playing field or equal standards for everybody. And I think with an 8-team, if you were to do it this way, yes, there would be some teams every so often that might get let in that way. But for the most part, it kind of works itself out. And you could rank them accordingly. And so you have those 5. So we're going to take those 5. You have Clemson, Alabama, and then Ohio State from the Big 10, Oklahoma from the Big 12, and Washington from the Pac-12. And so you have those 5. So the tricky part with filling out 8 teams is you have 3 more spots. And so with these 3, some have said you have to give an automatic to the non-Power 5 team, and some say, no, you shouldn't. And so if we say we take these 3 teams, and we say we take a Notre Dame who's undefeated, and I know we're doing this kind of after the fact, or we're listening to this from that perspective, so you have to kind of put yourself back into December when we were deciding all this, and we don't know the bowl games, don't know the championship. And so from that perspective, Notre Dame's 12-0. They've beaten everybody on their schedule, and there's a lot of disagreement of what to do with Notre Dame, because they don't play in a conference, and there's not this equal playing field. They're just playing their rivalries, and a lot of times they do play these tough teams, but then other times they get to play these other teams that aren't as good just because they're rivals. And I think that's tricky because they play 5 ACC games every year, but then they're still independent. But regardless of how you feel about all that, an undefeated Notre Dame is an undefeated Notre Dame, And I think we have to, if we're being realistic about this, we can't just not include them just because we don't like them, or we don't like that they don't have to play a conference championship. But I do think you can, when these are being ranked, I think if there's a team like a Clemson, Alabama, or even say like a 1-loss, say Georgia had 1 loss and they beat Alabama. I think there's an argument that you could have put them, and if that Georgia had actually beat Alabama, you could have put them in front of a Notre Dame because of the schedule and having us in I think a championship game. I think there's an extra criteria point, and I think that should come into play. So you have Notre Dame, and then you would have a Georgia, and then just for the sake of this, to take a UCF and just to see what would happen. And so the fun thing with this is then you have these 8 teams, and then I think that if you're doing an 8-team playoff, a way to make it really easy is to do the home team for the higher seed. You could do it at another neutral site, but I think it's easy because no one is usually using these stadiums other than like coordinating around high school championship games. I mean, I think it'd be easy. And who wouldn't want another home game as a reward? I mean, these games would be amazing. I mean, imagine Death Valley or Alabama or the Horseshoe, like having a home playoff game to advance. It'd be really cool. And I think it would really affect and give advantage to teams. And I think it would still make the regular season really have a lot of value with that. And so as we're walking through this, that's what it's going to be kind of like. And so ranking these teams, this is what I had. I had Bama 1, Clemson 2, Notre Dame 3, Oklahoma 4, Ohio State 5, Georgia 6, UCF 7, Washington 8. And so the first couple it would be similar to what the final standings were in the playoff committee, with a few caveats. I think the hard part, like we said before, you're having to take the 5 conference champions, is that doesn't mean you're taking the top 5 teams or the automatic teams. It's like, the college basketball tournament, is that you have these automatic bids, and it doesn't mean that the best team made it in. And in that system, you get the automatic bid, and then you have these at-large bids, and you can rank them differently based on that. But what kind of happens with this is that you would have to take Washington. Washington had a good year. They ended up beating Utah in the conference championship, and they're 9-3. That's a respectable year. I mean, they made the Rose Bowl for a reason. It's a respectable year, and I know it sometimes gives the appearance with this new playoff that some people feel that the bowl games aren't as important, which I think is silly. I mean, these are like traditional, amazing bowls. I mean, imagine playing in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, 100,000 people fighting for your school, all the people who've played before you, and you get to represent your school. I mean, come on. That's amazing. I mean, you think you don't want to win that? But you still would have to take a Washington. But what do you do? It would knock somebody else out. And so I think it also makes the final field a little tougher. When you have like a Michigan who has a 10-2 record, but the 2 teams they lost to was Notre Dame at the beginning of the year, and they lost to Ohio State, and they kept 62 points. Giving up 62 points to somebody, I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, that's really tough. And I know my mom went to Michigan, and I know she hated that. But, I mean, what are you going to do? It's really hard. And so trying to be objective, I mean, you gotta leave them out in this, I think. And then Florida was another top 10 team, but then them having 3 losses and not making the conference title game. I mean, you can't. It's a really good bounce back year for Florida, and I was impressed. And I think just the moxie of the team and just how they surrounded Mullen and the way he's going about it, I think they're going to be a threat in the East, SEC East, soon. But it's just not right now. And so the way I think you would just do this is then you would rank them, 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, and so on and so forth. And so I don't want to take away too much from the article. You should go and read that on the website. But what's cool is I think the big thing is giving the home games. And so the semifinals would then be still at the neutral sites. And I think you still incorporate the same rotation. You could still do it the same way. And I had Bama beating Washington, Oklahoma beating Ohio State, Georgia beating Notre Dame, and Clemson beating UCF. And so going through all that, you walk through and have these same semifinals. that we would have just had. I mean, close. I just mean the same timing of it. And I end up having, still having the same Clemson, Alabama. I mean, like, again, they were the two top tiers in the country this year. And so for them in the championship game, I mean, it just feels like that would be the thing. And so that would be what an 18 playoff would have looked like this year. And so other years you would have teams that are closer than that. And I think so it really just depends. I think we're really moving towards an 18 playoff. I think it's a matter of when these conferences and when the committee is feeling this pressure. I'm not even sure who all puts this together, when the people in charge are feeling the pressure of these teams that are constantly being left out, because it's hard when it's continually a lot of teams from the East and the Southeast, whether it be Clemson and Bama. I mean, they've met 4 times in the past 4 years in a row, and 3 of the 4 years in the title game. I mean, we're seeing a dominance between these two programs, which these fan bases love. But then across the country, I mean, everyone's not going to like that. West Coast people are going to be like, you're leaving us out. And I know in the Midwest and the Big Ten, they don't always feel like they're getting their due share. And so I think we're heading towards a world where I think there is an 18 playoff. I'm not sure when that is, but I think it's coming, just because we're in a culture right now where everyone wants their fair, equal shot. And I think there's a lot of merit to that, but I think there's also you do want to hold a high standard as well, and it's okay to leave people out as well. And we have to find this medium balance, because, like, I love college basketball and March Madness. Like, that's so much fun to watch. But do we really need to bring the top 68 teams in? I mean, it's this fun kind of crapshoot to see what happens. But really, do we need 68 teams? I mean, it's good TV. And granted, every so often you get like a VCU, being from the first 4 into the Final Four, or some Cinderella story that we love, but ends up being the traditional powers, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, Gonzaga recently. Villanova has won 2 out of 3 years. And so I think with these systems, there's going to be pluses and minuses whichever way you go. There's no perfect system. And the problem with this is then you could also, you could do with an 8 or a 4, you have to have equal number to everyone to move on to the next round. Or you do these buys like the NFL, but then I think that throws off the timing of teams, and then it's like, who gets the bye, and then how do you do that? And I don't know. Maybe that's the way you do it, but I don't like that as much. Maybe that's just me. I think it throws off a lot of times. I don't know. I don't like that system as much, but that could work. I could be wrong. I think if you're going to expand, you have to go to 8, and I think you have to stop at 8. Do not go higher than that. But it's kind of like this. I mean, that's the nature with any of these things. When you have 68 teams, the team number 69 is going to be saying, well, why didn't we get in? You look at our body of work. This is who we beat. Look who we did on the road. This many points. And so you're nitpicking whatever the cutoff is. I mean, the BCS era, they were nitpicking of like which teams would make it into the championship game. And it wasn't this perfect system. And so we're never going to have that. But I think we have to be okay with the system. And I think just also enjoy what we have in front of us, and not just worry about always perfecting. I think just also it can be enjoying the fact that we have what we have in front of us too, and still working on it, but not just be so focused on the future and griping about it, but also enjoying what we have. I mean, what we're watching right now with Clemson and Alabama, we're watching this one traditional power who's won, played in the 7 of the past 10 championships and won 5 under Nick Saban, this decade. I mean, that's crazy to think all that he's accomplished in that. And either you love him or you hate him, and I think it's good for the sport. And then you have like Clemson, who you have this Dabo Swinney, who was a wide receiver coach, who's a former walk-on in Alabama, and now he's helped make this Clemson team who won a championship back in '81, but now they're becoming this power just on the equal level of Alabama, winning 2 out of the past 3 years and beating Nick Saban head-to-head 2 out of 1 in the title games. And so you have these two back and forth. And I think we're going to look back on this era and be just amazed at all the talent that's flowing through these different teams and how fun this is. We get so caught up in like feeling like our team is getting the short end of the stick of what's going on. And I think we just have to be careful and just enjoy what we have too. And so, I mean, the title game was crazy. I know I'm a huge Clemson fan, and so I'm enjoying this right now. And so whether you are or not, it was just really fun. And I know that as a Clemson fan, I really enjoyed beating Alabama. I mean, that's just I just do because they've won so much, and rooting for my team. And so, I mean, but Alabama is such a great power. And so to beat them, I mean, they've been the standard for like so long in college football. So that game was really crazy. And I think that Clemson just started pouring it on after that. They really started getting to impose their will a little bit. And I think Alabama was just a little bit outmatched. I think they were young in the secondary. With that, they played well. It wasn't like Alabama. I don't think Alabama played as bad. I think Clemson just played their A game and was ready for what Alabama was trying to do. And so, I don't know. I mean, there's the huge proponent right now is with the reaction to this game. This is what happens. The reaction to the game is like, what's wrong with Alabama? Is this the end of the dynasty? What's going on with this? What's happening next with them? Is Nick Saban? How long is Nick Saban going on? Is he still the energy to coach? And I think there's things we want to know, but also Alabama didn't. It wasn't. I don't think they played as bad. They were moving the ball. They just couldn't convert. And I think give credit to Venables and the defense, Brent Venables and the defensive coordinator, of just the motivation they played with. And I think there was a big chip on their shoulder. And you have these senior leaders coming back, like Wilkins and Farrell and Bryant on all those defensive end guys, all four of them coming back to play, and just because they had unfinished business. I mean, that's not usual in this day and age. I mean, it's very understandable how these players who are coming and have this opportunity to change their life and better their families and set up their future and change. It's generational change. These players have had this dream for so long to have it sitting right there. I mean, it's hard not to pass up, signing for millions of dollars, or just signing up for this big contract. And I think it's really cool about the culture going on at Clemson is that you have these players wanting to come back and be in this together and finish this. I think just reaction from the game. I mean, too, I think you also have to give credit, like Trevor Lawrence. Like, what a freshman. I mean, coming in, not even as a starter, and coming in and winning the job midway through the year. And I mean, as others have said this, but like you never even really saw that freshman moment. He really just like played well. I mean, yes, he had a couple like shaky things in the game, but I mean, like who wouldn't in a title game, with that magnitude as a 19-year-old. I mean, even saw this funny thing on Twitter where he was like 10 months ago, he was just at prom. I mean, man, if I'm playing quarterback, that's crazy. And then to throw for like 347, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, that's so cool. And not that's just about numbers, but the poise he was playing with. The way he was distributing the ball. And then you have Justin Ross, another freshman from Alabama. And he comes in and has 6 catches for 153 and a touchdown with a 74-yard long run. I mean, there's just all this talent as well. And I think that's really cool to see. And then people jump into like, well, what happens in the future? What about the 2021 draft class? Is Trevor Lawrence the top in the country taken out? And I don't know. I think like, yeah, there's a good chance of that, but it's okay if he's not. I think just enjoying the journey where we're at and being okay for them. I mean, he's said that, life, like football's not his top priority. It's just, he's big with his faith and just being present and enjoying playing quarterback and being with his teammates and his friends. And enjoying the journey of that. And I think that's what's so cool about Dabo is that he's really emphasizing like enjoying the journey and not just the accolades or the rings or that, but enjoying the journey of being together as a team. This one version of the team that's going to be different. It's never going to happen again. And I think what Dabo is doing cannot be understated of the culture that he is creating with this fun family atmosphere of playing for each other, brotherly love, and getting to still get the best out of people. So there's different styles, and it's cool to see the different styles of it. And, Alabama, who has all this talent, and they have such a great pathline to the NFL. And they do it in this way of like getting the best out of you and pushing you and getting hard. And Clemson does that too, but in its own way. And so it's cool to see these powers go back and forth. And there's a lot of respect between Dabo and Nick Saban, which I think is cool. But Dabo said something, his just post-game reaction I thought was so cool. That to have this man who you're on this national stage with everybody watching you and Mike gets thrown in your face as soon as you win and the joy, and they're heaping you praise after praise. And I think just him giving glory to the Father, first off, I thought was really cool. And really just saying like how that's the most important thing in life. And he's just blessings of this, of winning is really cool. I mean, just that, the humble, the joyful, just this honest, complimentary. I mean, it'd be hard. It would be hard to not answer these questions of like, when did you know that your dominance, when you dominated them fully and took their will? I mean, questions like that, they're just sending on a tee for you just to like talk about yourself and all these accomplishments of what you did and all these things about yourself. And he's really pushing it off and saying like, hey, we just played our best game and that was a really good team. And there's something that he said in there too about players, about wanting to serve their hearts and not their talents when you're recruiting or being with these young men. And I think that's such a cool perspective that we don't want to miss of not just trying to get the most out of these young men, but also just trying to serve them and knowing that many of them won't continue to play football. There's a very few percentage chance, and most of them are trying to better their lives and set up for themselves and their families and their future family, and just wanting to serve them as the best they can and not just trying to get the most out of their talent. And so, I don't know, I just thought that was really cool, and I guess I just don't want us to miss all that was going on in that game. I mean, you have even guys like an Adam Choice, who is the third string running back in the game, and he just seems like another guy, but he was originally going to be the starter a couple years ago for the first recent title. But he tore his ACL. And after he tore it, Wayne Gallman took over the starting spot. And he fought back, and he was doing the best he could. And then when you have a team like Clemson where they're still chugging out and getting more and more top recruits, he could have left, but he stuck it out, earned his spots, got, 6 touchdowns or so this year, was a leader on the team. That's so cool. Or you have like Hunter Renfrow, whose story I'm sure some of you have heard, but just becoming a walk-on, being a quarterback and just being this team player and quarterback in high school and being this walk-on, earning a spot, earning the respect of the team and leading them, and now being a leader, getting to step up in a big way a couple years ago, and now being a leader for these young guys, these young talented guys. And I have to think some of that poise and some of that character are things that he has helped lead them in. And I think it's just so cool to see a guy like that represent my school personally. So anyway, that's enough. I'm sure for you non-Clemson fans, I'm sure that's enough of hearing from us. But I just thought just some reaction from the game, just because I thought that was so cool and not what was expected. And I think just enjoying reaction from the game. So there you have it. That's the end of our first podcast. Just wanted to jump in, kind of give a little summary, a little background of me and what the heart behind this is, of us just being together, learning each other, and enjoying just spending time and enjoying talking about sports of what I love. And if you're listening to this, what you love or enjoy doing with your loved ones is playing sports and watching and being together. And so we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm so excited for what's coming up next. We've already got some fun podcasts in the working on some articles coming up. So you can stay tuned, subscribe, review for us. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like or would like to see more of. We'd love to hear from you. So stay tuned. But for now, we're signing off.